Hello everyone, it's Lisa John here, and welcome back to another Wisdom Wednesday. So today we'll be in Numbers chapter 14, verses 24. And it says, "But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring him to the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it." So just a little bit of a recap of what's going on in this passage. So the nation of Israel had been under captivity and were enslaved by the Egyptians for over 430 years. And it's a lot when you think about it. So God was the one who led them out into freedom from death to life. And now we see that God had given them the promised land. It was described in the Bible as a land flowing with milk and honey, a land of abundance and a promise of God's faithfulness. However, when the 10 Israelites went to go scout out the land to see what lay ahead, such as whether the land was fruitful, what type of enemies they were going to come up against, and they were very discouraged when they got there. They saw that there were giants, and they immediately started not only doubting their own abilities, but they started doubting God's faithfulness. What if God didn't want them to go into the land after all? What if He wasn't strong enough to enable them to win and gain the victory? However, we see that Caleb is one of the only ones who chooses to look past the obstacles that stand in his way and look up to the God that he serves. He remembers that God is so much greater than the obstacles we serve. And we see that because of Caleb's obedience, despite what he faces, God honors him for that and causes him to inherit the land. God describes Caleb as someone who has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully. Some versions or translations say that Caleb followed him wholeheartedly. When we think about this, how many times in our lives have we not followed God wholeheartedly? How many times in our lives have we just acted just like everyone else in the world? However, God calls us not to conform to the world, but to live transformed. Just like Caleb, we too are called to obey God's word and obey God's commandments, and not just listen to them, but put it into practice on an everyday basis. Caleb didn't just hear God's instructions, he went out, he obeyed them, and he trusted that God would bring his plan into fruition. So often we can be really scared when faced with the obstacles that lie ahead on our journey. But this verse reminds us that we have everything we need because we have God on our side. We must be the ones who follow Him fully. We must be the ones who act differently than the rest, not because of anything that we've done, but because of what God has already done in our lives. Instead of going through life living just like anyone else, let's dare to live holy and set apart, just as God has showed us how to. Let's dare to live wholeheartedly for God, not holding anything back, even when we face doubts and even when we face obstacles. Because what we do, our obedience in the here and now, has an everlasting generational impact. It goes on to say that his descendants, Caleb's descendants, will go on to inherit the land also. Can you imagine going into uncharted territory, knowing that God is on your side, that He is making a way, that despite the enemies and obstacles that stand in your path, God will be so much greater than that, and He will cause you to go where no one has gone before, so that you can pave a way for future generations to look up and remember that God is in control. What you do now can change the world, not because of your own strength, but because of God's strength. Wherever you are at right now, I encourage you to obey the Lord, to live differently than everyone else, to serve God with a whole heart and trust that He is always faithful, because your obedience matters. I'll see you next week.